It'll be interesting. Yeah, the answers. What we should do is,
Helen, are you able to summons up? Oh, he was better. Heather, are you able to summons up one of the IT guys? Because this point, I mean, I think they were supposed to have set it up, right? That's exactly right. And it's not happening. Flipping up and down, saying it is as staff not connected. So it's trying.
Try to guess because we have been having some problems with our satellite.
I did that already. I tried to guess first, thinking it might, because I don't even ask it to do it anyway. All it's just doing is going in and out, looking back and forth and saying not connected.
So the guess password is that one.
But it hasn't been
Okay, meeting called to order. We'll do it again. Okay, welcome all. And first I'll ask for apologies. And Bill is in the district, but he's not here, so we'll just put him as late. He's normally pretty good. Right. Declarations of interest.
I would just like to say that in the Wairau Beach paper, I was a submitter in the hearing, but that doesn't mean I'm conflicted that I was involved with it.
Right. Okay. Noted.
Well, if you're sharing that you're involved with it, I was very guilty too.
Yeah, but Amber was submitted to the final decision.
To the decision.
I was the chairman of the facilitation.
Okay. Okay. Well. Okay. With that, I don't think there's going to be an issue because we're not here to relitigate it, and we're going to. It's here to be noted. And if you've got a couple of questions, Neil will be here to answer them. So we're not going to be giving our opinions on it. It's done and dusted, and we're not going to relitigate it. So, okay. Confirmation of non-confidential minutes. If someone would like to. Moved by Councillor Foster, second by Councillor Wilson. I'm sorry. Okay. I correct that. Moved by Councillor McLean, second by Councillor Wilson. Did you say anything at all, Larry? You didn't? Okay, right. Okay. All in favour? Any matters arising? No matters rising? Right. Anything to do with the action sheet? Does anyone? Yep. So you don't have an issue with that one? Right. Well, we'll move on. Right. Leave of absence, acknowledgements and tributes and none. Public important persistent none today. Extraordinary business. Any extraordinary business? Any? Yep.
I just want to raise the matter of the severe erosion around the corner of State Highway 35 at Chirihow, just as a general item.
Thank you.
I have sent it in.
Yep. Right. Notices of motion? None of those. Or any adjourned business? None of those. Right. We'll go right on with our reports on page 14.
So through the chair, this report is the one that the committee and council have asked for, and it's been around the assessment of schools and the ratings for where the interventions are. As you committee members are more than well aware, we're requests from a number of schools, community groups around where we're going to be prioritising our interventions in the long-term plan. And this report was commissioned to look at those schools, assess how those risks were. As you can see from the GHD report that's provided there, some schools got back to us, which was great to give us the information that we needed. There were a couple that were lacking, but the priorities are ranked there, and the interventions are ones that we'll now work through to prioritise through the long-term plan as part of our minor improvements budget, and work through which ones we'll be able to do and be able to get those into action as soon as possible.
Anyone like you, Councillor Stoll?
I had one question, Dave. In the prioritised list on page 25, two of the schools in the top 5 did not get back to us. That wouldn't mean that this is not going to happen there. This was just that initial engagement didn't happen, but they are still on that priority. Doesn't matter if they came back to us or not.
Through the chair, yes. So the rankings are the rankings. It's whether or not they fit into it.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question also? I see schools down to number 6, starting at 7. From there down, there's logging trucks going past them at high speed, and like a lot of these other ones are urban suburbs where we've got 50 k's, or some of them might even have 40 Ks in parts, like Mangapapa School now has got a flashing light. So I would wonder why that's, but these other ones, and so the priority sort of just escapes me how, and I know that the Wairinga Kuri School, you've got it down to 150, and also that there was no response, but they have asked many times in the past about the trucks going past, the quarry trucks that go past there. They get as many quarry trucks as log trucks. So, you know, so how do we get on with like the priorities of the, does this include the fact there's trucking at high speed? Does that take into account? Okay. I'm sorry.
Can I introduce Dai Akarangi, who's our Road Safety Coordinator for Tairāwhiti Roads?
Sorry, would you like to come up and sit here by the microphone? Sorry.
I feel all official now.
Sorry.
Kia ora everyone. I'm Diane Akirangi, the road safety educator. So in terms of your first question, I'm happy to provide the assessments from GHD, and those will indicate how they actually assessed every school. And that, along with that, is based on the population at those schools. The second question, why are number 4 and 5? What he's done is basically done all schools, well, most of them, the ones with large populations. He's assessed them anyway, but yes, they didn't feed back, but had they would have ranked in 4 and 5. It's just the indication. What I'm asking is, or what we were asking is, do we want the ones that did respond to be the priority?
Yes. So can you say that again? Asking if what?
If we are going to prioritise.
To change that priority. Is that what you are saying?
No, not to change it. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I just wondered whether the assessment of prioritisation for each school was done in isolation or whether other factors were taken into account. I can think of one particular area that is actually a complex area, and it's one that has come to this committee before as a safety concern, along with a few other ones that we had a list of about 6, and one area over in Kaiti, and we had a few areas that the community was worried about. And the one I'm thinking of is on Childers Road next to the YMCA, and I'll declare I'm the chairman of the YMCA. But there are 2 schools that are within 250 metres of that very complex intersection. And so the rating there, are they done in isolation or the whole scenario used to work out that priority list?
It's taken in isolation, but there is a paper that looks at the interconnection of the schools as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and the radius.
Mr. Chairman, it's an interesting point though, because
yeah.
Gone back to those schools that we knew were in high profile or busy corners and busy areas and asked them for a response. But it's done now.
Yes. Councillor
McLean. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're looking at some of that prioritisation. It makes me wonder, when we've got schools in 100k zones that haven't got any speed smoothing signs or anything like that, I just wonder about that prioritisation, because when I look at Riverdale, they've got the sign up there. No, sorry, Mangapapa, they've got the road sign up there, and I mean, I came down that road every other day, and the speed through there and the way it was monitored on the crossings was quite superb. And there was often transport vehicles standing or sitting there watching. And I never saw any bad behaviour there, but you go out into the country and you occasionally see the bad behaviour, and some of it's at 80 and 100 kilometres an hour. And I think I agree with our chairman that where there's these heavy logging trucks and heavy trucks moving through in volumes, I think that it should be on a higher priority.
So through the chair. Oh, I'm on now. So through the chair, one of the things, if you look on into your report and on page 24, there's to prioritise how we got to the scores that are there. The purpose of bringing this to the committee is this is the ranking when we've put it through those scores. If you don't agree with the scores, this is the methodology that we've put in place to give a rational answer to the scores that are there. If there are scores that you want us to change, we can change the criteria, but this is our advice to you on how we've come to the rankings that we have. You're completely correct. Some of those schools do already have measures in place, for example, Mangapapa, around slowing speed down. So does Ngātepa with the flashing lights that are going in there, and we've also got some proposed for out at Muriwai as well. So some of these do have interventions in place. It doesn't, however, lower the risks associated with those schools. We have some mitigations in place, however, the risks are still there, whether the mitigations are or not, due to either the high speed or the high volume of vehicles that are going past. Kaiti School has a number of these things, however, it's still a very busy road with some very big trucks going past it constantly. So no matter how many mitigations we put in there, with these interventions, the risks are still there for those children. So this is part of us trying to give a list, which if you want us to change around, absolutely, that's your prerogative as the committee, but this is our advice based on those things on page 24 around how we got to where we did.
Well, if I can comment on that, I actually think that, you know, like that some of these schools, they don't have footpaths running beside them. There's quite a school that you can hop outside, there's a footpath running along, the children have footpaths and that, whereas some of these rural schools, they park against the drain on the verge and they have to virtually go onto the road to get to the car. And I know that you talk about crashes around, and there might be 1 or 3 or 4 crashes around the high volume suburban schools, and they'll be bad mum drivers who've bumped into, well, and I on the basis that mostly mums deliver their children, and yes, they'll dent some panels from time to time. The day that an accident occurs outside the Makaurau school or the Ngātepa school, or that you're going to have a minibus full of kids killed because you've got logging trucks going past there, and badly on corners, and you cannot see around the corners, and I just think we need some sort of quick fix for those situations, and even if it is just a slow down sign at the schools, and that's all they're asking for at this stage. You know, we can do the rest. All they're saying is give us a slow down sign, and doesn't need to be in flashing lights or anything like that.
But if you're going to follow the process, you've got to do it as was asked. You would have to change the weighting.
Yes.
This method.
And that's correct. So how do we do that though? How would we?
So, Mayor, Chair, we have a list that's in front of us now. As we've said, some of these schools already have interventions in place to varying degrees of success. This is because we know that there's high interest in this paper, and so that's why we've brought it back before we've had time to actually go through what the work list will look like and which ones we'll be rolling out. Yeah. May I suggest, if you're comfortable with what's here, we come back with a further report that actually prioritises when things will happen and what the type of intervention will be for you to then consider if you want to change that work program as it comes out, rather than changing in through this methodology, because the methodology is the one that we're giving you as our advice. Let's see what the output is, and then if you want to change the schedule of works, then so be it.
I'm happy to allow further discussion if you...
Yep. Yep, sure. Yep, we can do that.
You're right with that? Yeah. Yeah. You're really okay with that? Moved by Councillor Stoltz, second by Councillor Seymour. All in favour? Against? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council submission.
I was moved that Mr. Chairman, that service that in place that common sense and straightforward and carry over.
Okay,
it's moved by Councillor Seymour. I'll second it. Is there any discussion?
I've jumped. You've jumped to paper, Councillor.
Sorry.
Pat's moved page 101. We're on page 32.
Oh, that's
Are you jumping?
I'm here on 32.
Sorry, councillor Seymour, which paper have you moved? Is it the one on page 32 or the page on 101?
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
It's
It's the same.
No, she didn't.
We'll just give her time to, we'll just give time. We're on the paper with the submission for the government policy statement. And it's a obviously the submission's been, and they're asking us to retrospectively approve it. Are you satisfied to continue moving that, Councillor Seymour? Oh, yeah. If you speak to with your microphone, but I'm happy to move it, and second by Councillor Burdett.
And apologies for the lateness, Mr. Chair.
Right, that's fine. Any discussion here?
Well, it's long coming. Makes a bit of sense.
Right. Any other? I'd just like to speak to it briefly. I went down to the presentation when the GPS was sort of unveiled. If you go to page 35, you'll see that where the percentages of expenditure will be focused, and state highway improvements will decrease by 11%. And that's basically in favour of some urban road and passenger transport. Now, they talk about livable cities, and we've got to be really and make the point hard that one of the big things that makes our city livable is its ability to be involved with the rest of New Zealand by state highways. And like, we really need state highways to keep us economically viable. We need state highways to keep us as a livable city. So, and in the submission, it is mentioned, but once upon a time, a trip to Auckland was 9 hours, and now you can do it in 5.5 hours. And the better the state highways are, the better the provincial cities can actually participate with the rest of New Zealand. So it is in there in our submission, so I'm pleased to see that.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, we've got a new document tabled today as well, haven't we, sitting beside our desks, which is what I'm trying to, was why I was scrummaging around trying to find it. But it has been sent, hasn't it? Yes, it was circulated separately, but I knew we'd been provided with it. So it is gone, and we're retrospectively approving it, just to be clear.
That's right. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Look, it's all interpretation of this statement. And yeah, this new government is focusing on safety as one of the major drivers. And we wouldn't have an argument with, sorry, yeah, you're right, Bill. We wouldn't have an argument with that. The so-called decrease of 11% on state highways, well, at the end of the day, it may not be as important in other areas, but it's certainly very important in our area, because, and that has been highlighted in our submission. And that needs to be highlighted, because at the end of the day, we're so dependent on those main highways coming into our area that you can spend all the money wherever you like, but if those roads aren't open, well, the place starts to not function anymore. And that has been emphasised in the submission, so that's why I really support it. So in general, we would support the thrust of this government, which is actually putting more money into the infrastructure. You know, each section there has got an increase, and it's just the state highway that's got a reduction. So it's whether they actually listen to what we're saying in this region. We're trying our best, and I know David is leading the charge there. I'm going to lose my voice in a second, but we have to keep advocating all the time and reinforcing that we aren't the same as other areas. We're vulnerable to cut off from the state highway. So that's why we need as much money spent there.
Thank you. I mean, I just like to say, I totally agree with those comments. So we can't, I had it on and then I get told to turn it off, and it's a bloody nightmare keeping up with it just quietly. Our state highways are absolutely critical because all our side roads feed only to those two routes. So, and if I'm just looking at this submission, which has gone, and on about 3 pages in, 4 pages in, it has a heading rail, but that is actually only bullet point 14 and 15. And bullet point 16 starts to go on, and it should have had a new heading, I would suggest, because it's the key areas of growing pressure on transport network, and it covers exactly the points that Councillor Wilson's just made, that it's around our state highways. It goes on about our primary industries heavily reliant on land transport, and that's into and out of our region. So we really do have to stress the importance of the state highways. And if we were to think about 11% less repairs and maintenance, that is quite substantial. It allows me to raise my picture right now then of this erosion that's happening on the corner on Turi Howe Point on State Highway 35. If we're going to have 11% less funds available for our state highway network, then it's going to put our network at a greater risk than it is now. So I'm not sure how we address that. And I have yet to find the paragraph in this new document that covers it off. Is it referred to anywhere? Can council officers refer us to the paragraph where we might have addressed that issue of...
In our submission.
Well, this is we've just been provided with this as the draft submission. So somewhere in here, and I know we had it last night, but we also had 4 agendas to read over 2 days. I just can't find, and I'm asking someone to alert me to the paragraph that deals to our response to 11% reduction, if there is one at all.
Through the chair, we do have a disclaimer at point 2 that the submission is subject to committee
Thank you
obviously
so much,
approval. So
we could,
in terms of, yeah, we can send a
we
revised.
could send a further comment with
That's
respect
right, to highlight that matter.
concerns raised with respect to the importance at the state highway. I mean,
That's
it's not just doing it because they've taken 11% down. It's actually saying those highways in and out and through the Wairika Gorge are absolutely critical. State Highway 35 going north and south, and then State Highway 2. So I would like to see an inclusion of a paragraph to that effect. And can we amend that? Can we amend the page I just referred to? Because rail is only the first two bullet
Captured in rail.
Yes, and it's actually, it should say
Separate heading.
economic, because it really talks about the pressure of the transport network. It's not about rail at all from 16 on.
No problem, can do that.
Yeah, I was going to bring it up, Mr. Chairman.
But it doesn't address our concern about the fact that we're being topped 11%.
Right. Would I be able to put my interpretation of this? This is the whole national indication of what will happen. If we take ourselves to page 35, we should be very happy that they are saying there's a 96% increase in regional improvements. And if you read the description there properly, it says to support investment in regional projects that improve safety, resilience, and access for people and goods. So even though nationally they are talking about an 18% decrease on state highways, I think we should be very happy that in the same document, they are talking about a 96% increase in regional activity, which covers us and exactly the stuff that we were just talking about.
Depends whether they interpret the right way.
But if we don't defend our own territory and promote our own position, another local authority will do it and they'll be the winners.
I just think we need to read this whole document as a whole.
But this is a submission that you're going to do.
Okay, thank you for that. It is a submission, and I think we've got to. Actually, I spoke to that point at Wellington, that regional cities do need good state highways because their connectivity to New Zealand is a requirement. So I think it won't do us any harm to make a point of that as well.
Mr. Chairman, Also, it was pointed out to us on Tuesday how important it was for the road transport to get the likes of Leaderbrand to the markets and get them like overnight.
Yep.
So that's another point, the movement of our produce.
Fresh produce is correct. Okay, so if is the committee happy to have a paragraph made up and supply it with the submission to that effect?
Yes, please.
I think we do need to add a little bit more weight into it to really drive. I know it's actually in the document,
Take some advice.
but I think if we just focused a little bit more wording around that and made it stronger.
So is the committee comfortable that staff will make sure that there's an inclusion around produce and the significance of the state highways to the Gisborne region? Yeah. We can put that in as part of the submission.
Critical is the word.
Yep. And use critical, so there, you're comfortable with us then sending that through?
And I'd like to suggest we do actually refer to the reduction that might apply to our region, because that's what we're concerned about. I mean, we're not getting growth, so we don't want to see the reduction.
And it's fresh produce too, that was emphasised to us.
We'll leave it with our staff and perhaps I have to email out and get comments.
I'll just let them do it.
Okay then, so we've got a second and a move for this paper?
Yeah, I'll move it. That's already done.
So all in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you all. Damn things. Everybody hear me. Page 101.
I'm happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Mayne. Right. Any questions with this? Any discussion?
A little bit of a query. We have this summer construction period, and I know our climate really well, and I think a lot of the time it seems to limit what we can actually achieve by putting ourselves into this frame of summer construction period. Sometimes our winters are drier than our summer, and we can do a lot of good work over winter. So, I do have a little bit of a concern when we just kind of putting ourselves, and we do it a lot with roading and everything, when sometimes we might have a higher rainfall over summer than what we do in winter time, and we have a great construction period of winter. So rather than preempting something and putting all the eggs in that one little basket, I would, it would be good to be able to have a broader scope on weather patterns and weather forecasting, weather predictions, because the forecasting nowadays is actually quite good.
We'll ask Neil if there's got any reason for that.
Can I speak to the general and then Neil can speak to the Waipawa Flood Control Scheme? When we talk about a summer construction season, so for example, it's not raining today, but we can't lay asphalt anymore because the ground temperature's dropped too low. So we can't guarantee that it's going to stay down. So a lot of the things around roading are related to temperature rather than to rain. The other part of it as well is as we go into winter, the water tables come up and we can construct definitely, but the costs go through the roof because we're now having to pump out groundwater. So up at Wainaki, ironically, we had such a wet summer up there that we weren't able to do some of the works that we wanted to do because the groundwater didn't go down low enough. There's no point us trying now because the groundwater's come up. As we go into the more unpredictable months of the year, the cost goes up because the contractors start pricing risk in as we go into that winter period because they can't work some days, they can work others, so we start to lose time because they just put in for a wet day, so they get a time extension based on the contract due to wet days. The other part is also the contractors who do our construction season are also doing our maintenance during winter, so they move from gear. So it is around that, is why particularly in the roading space, but is there anything you want to add around Waipawa?
I mean, when we talk about summer, I mean, that's kind of spring through to autumn, and it's very dependent on the preceding weather. So if we've got a wet winter, then we'll have to delay works until the soil moisture and the water table drops. So we've got a sort of October through to kind of now window, and that's all weather dependent and how much rainfall and temperatures and all that. So when we talk about summer, it's a much wider than just purely summer.
Sounds like a perfectly logical question and sounds like a perfectly logical answer.
Yes, it does. Just like a lead-up time for you to decide when your construction would be. How long would that be? I mean, do you give yourselves, 6 weeks or 2 months? Or, if you're coming out of our, say, a wet winter and you're looking at a construction date to start with,
it's not a science.
Some of it's going to be dictated by the procurement, and if we procure it early and then give that flexibility to the contractor. But it's also a little bit about contractor availability and setting that stone in and balancing that risk of setting a date which is too flexible.
Yep, sweet.
Any other questions? Seems a perfectly logical request. We've got some work undone and money rolled over, so been moved and seconded. And so any other, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. We have the Wainui Beach, page 105. Dave's going to actually go and take a seat on the side for the moment because he lives in the area and feels that he could, he'd rather somebody else do the job for him. Now, what we're going to do here is we aren't here to relitigate a decision. The decision's been made, and so what we'll do is, if it's only for noting, so if someone would like to move it,
I'll move.
moved by Councillor Seymour, second by Councillor Burdett, and if there are any questions that you have concern about, or no, not concerned about, because as I said, that's relitigating. If you have any questions with regard to the paper, we've got Neil here to answer them. So if not, we'll put it. So if there are questions, Councillor Seymour?
Yes, I just wanted to know what the process will be going forward for, we've discussed the concept of managed retreat, which may or may not be something that ultimately is put in place, but this is a decision that's been taken. It's totally effective. It's had no appeals, but what next? What are we going to do next? I see we're talking about an implementation plan, but that's about at 27. That's actually only about a piece of the work. So I'm talking about a larger picture for the residents of Wainui. We might have no storms for 2 or 3 years. We might. We don't know.
So through the chair, there's no plans for any more resource consent applications for hard engineering at this point. So it'll be a process to take council and the community through about where we go next. Where we don't have the budgets at the moment to do a full review of the strategy, which would then incorporate the what next. Certainly in the short term, I'll be meeting with the community regarding the e-text alert and that sort of swell alert type process. But in regard to taking the community and council through the fact that we've had 2 recent consent processes decline for hard engineering, that will take a bit of work to go through, again, with council and with the community.
Thank you.
Councillor Stoltz.
Neil, I can't find it in here, so I'm just going to wing it. I made a note about the Wainui Beach Management Strategy. And part of it, number 4, says, I've got such a loud voice. Part of it, number 4, says, broad vision to conserve and enhance the environment for future generation, but with a strong focus on protecting private property. So that is not consistent. This Wainui Beach strategy that we adopted at this stage is not consistent with what the rest of the papers say. At number 31, we are talking about in the future, maybe like Pat, Councillor Seymour alluded to, maybe a managed retreat. But I'm concerned that we have passed this Wainui Beach, and I'm not disagreeing with it at all. It was just when I read through it and I saw what was in the earlier paper, and here's definitely a big focus saying, but with a strong focus on protecting private property. That is not consistent with the rest of the paper. So I would love your comment on that, and also how we're going to address this in future, because there's a definite conflict.
You're correct. The change from the original strategy, which was a beach management strategy, to the erosion management strategy, the inclusion of protection of private property was put in. That does conflict with the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, and to some extent, great extent, the Te Rāwhiti Plan the district plan. So there is a conflict between the strategy, and that's what the hearing commissioner found. And that's one of part of the decisions he made when he declined the hard engineering structures, was that the strategy, which had a hard engineering and protection of private property, conflicted with the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, which has bigger teeth.
So you want to agreed way forward by the community of Wainui
Yep.
over a period of time.
Yeah, but that doesn't gazump the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. So that policy has a higher weighting, and that's where the weighting was put on by the commissioner. So we have a strategy now which has reference to protecting private property and putting in hard engineering structure. We've had consents declined for that. Where we go is we remove those connotations and those hard engineering structures and protection of private property out of the strategy. But that's going to be, again, a process for the community and the council to go through.
That was my question.
Yeah. So we've had two recent decisions, yet the community still want to protect private property, where the policies, which is the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, is saying, well, you can't. So the logic is that we have to remove that protection of private property from the strategy, and that's what we'd take.
Because if I then just supplementary to my original question, because that is when people the Wainui community, this is what they workshopped on for years or quite some time, and this is what they signed up for. So I can imagine if I was a resident there or living out there, and this is what we workshopped and agreed on, the fact that it's inconsistent with the New Zealand coastal policy would be irrelevant to me, because this is what council worked through with us and this is what we decided on. So my next question to you is, maybe it is time for us to get this in line with the coastal policy, because this inconsistency misleads.
Yeah, and that's where it was logical, and I'm said in the paper, it was logical to remove hard engineering and sort of introduce that managed retreat, because to put it in line with the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement and the recent decisions.
Is there any possibility of a liability to council on the basis that we've had that in our statement earlier, that we would have an emphasis on protecting property, and now that has been withdrawn because of this process? Is there any
I don't believe so, because of the strategy, the erosion management strategy is just a strategy for council, whereas the Coastal Policy Statement is a government policy which we have to adhere to. So the community and council have gone through a process. We've had advisors, but it hasn't gone through a resource consent process or environment court process to see whether it marries up completely. Whereas we now have a hearing process that says it doesn't marry up. Now we need to take the community through removing those aspects which aren't consistent.
Councillor Seymour.
Thank you. Without going to look immediately at the Coastal Policy Statement, are there different criteria in it for the protection of public land as opposed to private land? Because I'm aware that in the very early stages, I looked at the beach at Castle Point, where the council have got hard engineering and it's very tidy and effective. And one of the submitters told me about another beach in Hawke's Bay, and I'm sorry, I can't come up with the name of it. So is there a distinction between the protection of private property and the protection of public property?
Yes, there is. So in the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, you're more likely to get a consent if it's protecting significant council infrastructure or government infrastructure, whether it's a significant road or hospital or significant infrastructure.
Okay. I think, unless there's any other questions, we're sort of got to be aware of the relitigation, but also it's been moved and seconded.
And Mr. Chairman, I think we do, in response to both my queries and Councillor Stoltz, we'd like to know what the way forward is going to be between council and the residents out.
Okay. So it was pointed out earlier that there's going to be consultation or discussion now with the residents. Council will get involved in meeting with the residents and starting that process going. So the way forward going from here. So you happy with that? Is that?
Yep. Well, they're going to be talked to about the EFIX, but that's
Yeah, well,
They need
certainly.
to understand the coastal policy statement stuff, because otherwise, why would the workshop have continued to allow them to move towards hard protection? So if the coastal policy statement has come in more recently, then that needs to be brought to their attention.
Yeah, the coastal policy statement came in 2010, which this was the current one was adopted in 2014. So, but again, the people who prepared the beach strategy would have looked at the New Zealand coastal policy statement, but there is, I guess, grey areas, and it's only when you get to the hearing stage or the environment court stage that that New Zealand coastal policy statement is kind of tested.
Any other questions?
This has been going on for as long as I've been in council. Where's it all going to end up?
In the sea, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Okay. All in favour?
Aye.
Against?
No, sorry, I've got a question. I mean, we can't let this go away without a question. Those are all the situation on hard sealed roads. At what point will we be looking at non-sealed roads? Because I could bring you some measurements of the size of the potholes on the Waiamoko Road. And actually, I'll tell you seriously, if you're going up the road at a moderate speed, it is liable to throw your manual vehicle out of gear if you hit the potholes. That has happened to me. That is how bad the potholes are. So what are we doing about measuring the standard of non-sealed roads, please?
At the moment, we're doing as the contractors are doing a survey of all unsealed roads. That will probably be the next report I'll be giving you. This one is a result of what we did recently for sealed roads. The next part will be the unsealed one. There's a different way of assessing the condition of those roads. So it's not quite like the way we assess sealed roads. So you'll be seeing a report from me again for the unsealed survey.
Thank you. And no reflection on the author. Do we have to wait for 6 weeks if that's the next meeting report before we see any metal in these potholes that throw the gears out on our vehicles?
So through the chair, if you look further through the agenda, you'll see where our heavy metalling program is. And I am aware that Waiamoko Road has been graded within the last few weeks as well.
It has not been graded and we do not appear on your schedule of heavy metalling. Don't worry, I have looked extremely carefully at it.
Happy to discuss that when we get to that paper, Councillor
Thank
Seymour.
you. We will.
Okay, any other questions?
Road condition and roughness survey. I want to a few bouquets here to David, Tairāwhiti Roads and the Transport Agency. Highway 35 is superb. It's probably been 4.5, maybe 5 mil spent from here right up to Whangaparao. It's the best I've seen in the 20 years I've been on this road. Long may it continue, and thanks to all those concerned.
Yeah. We'll frame that. We'll bring that when they start running.
Mr. Chair.
Those are facts. Those are actual facts.
Right. Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm just looking at the summary of the road faults and that. I wrote to Tairāwhiti Road some months ago regarding Knight Road, which is partially sealed and partially not. And there's a lot of horticulture comes out of there. And we got a major complaint at our community meeting about the potholes, the dust, especially on the fruit, the kiwi fruit that comes out of there. But I've seen nothing since I sent that letter. So it's only 0.7 of a kilometre to finish. So it'd be nice to see that in this report, in this
Yeah.
summary.
When we selected the roads with high volume of heavy traffic. So because obviously we couldn't afford to do all roads in the district, we picked those roads that have a very high volume of traffic. Now, if there's particular roads that we were not able to pick up from our survey, we will, if there's a complaint and you have just brought it to our attention now, we will do a survey of that road.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions or queries? It's been moved and seconded. All in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Yes.
Carried. So if we go on to page 129, it's more the same. I'll move it. Moved by councillor Dunn.
Right. Just one question. On this one, can we have a start date for the Wainui Road cycleway?
They've started. No,
They started.
The surveys and things, the team are putting the signs up this at lunchtime when I drove past, so they're there.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, next.
Yeah. Any other questions with regard to capital projects?
I thought
Just one query, it's page 133, and it's not extra.
I hate telling people to put the button on, I hate putting it on myself.
I'm just checking, I am still on this. It's with respect to the Mangamanu Bridge, and I just wondered, I mean, I can see what it tells me, I've read it, but wouldn't we expect that observation to come up in the first assessment of what was required, rather than once they got there to start to do the work and then find it needed more work and more design?
Yeah, so through the chairman, the level 1 assessments that we are doing on the bridge conditions cannot identify anything that is hidden. Obviously, here we are talking about the beams and the concrete, precast concrete elements that they are pretty much embedded into the soil and into the embankment. And in order to come up with the deficiencies, we need to dig left and right of the both abutments and expose them. And that's what the bridge engineers do. Initially, they just make an estimate of about 90% accuracy. And once we have the contractor in place, after the procurement process, he's doing a little bit of investigation. It comes out the whole truth of what is hidden there. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. All right, one more, and that's heavy metalling on page 134. I'm sure you like the sound of this one, Councillor Burdett.
Well, I was going to ask, Mr. Chairman, this is good to see, but what about requests for service for a bit of metal or some metal to alleviate some of the problems? Do we have a response to that, or do we have to wait until the 1st of July?
So through the chair, we aren't doing any reactive metalling at the moment. So part of the paper that was put to the previous council meeting was around prioritising where we were going to be. This is the additional information that we didn't have for you at that time around where we will be doing a heavy metalling program. As you can see from the paper, we've prioritised the school bus routes. We've also got some forestry roads in there where we know we have problems at the moment that we're not going to be able to work through without putting something there before winter. But the answer is no, there is no extra money for metalling at the moment. This is what we have. We have some maintenance that is going through, and as you know, we're tweaking every single couple of weeks. We're going through and changing to make sure that the budgets are right for the work programs that are there. But at the moment, there's nothing extra than what we're identifying here.
So supplementary, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, okay.
To David, I assume and presume, safety first, that the rural bus route roading would take priority over forest roads?
So the routes that you have there, the roads that are there are the ones that we're going to be doing. The order and what they'll be rolled out as the crews are able to get to them. So the priority has always been the school bus routes for this 1.5 million. As long as we can get those roads up, and the ones that are there are the ones that we will be doing. It's just as they're rolled out or as the crews work through the network to get them there and as the material arrives on site.
Supplementary to that, Mr. Chairman, Is the winter coming on going to impact on this?
We're constantly working with the network team, both within Tairāwhiti Roads and Downers, around where we're going to be prioritising our spend, and we'll be doing that right up until the end of June. We aren't hiding from the fact we know we've got an issue with water tabling on the local roads, and we're working with Downers to be addressing that, and we're working with them to make sure that they're going to keep up where we can within the budgets, and if we can't, then we'll be coming back to council to explain that.
Well, Downers are doing a good job.
So, can I ask a question? So all these forestry ones identified as forestry harvest, are they harvesting forest this coming season? Are they, was that information given by our forest companies that where they will be harvesting, is it?
So in the last probably 6 to 8 months, we've been working quite closely with the Wood Council members around where they are going to be. Part of what we did is we provided them the list of roads that we had taken out of RAM that we knew needed some work coming up, and where we know that we've got some issues because the team are out on the network. We know that they'll be using most of these roads, they've told us, and it came from the forestry managers, the owners, and everybody to how we're incorporating. Some of them are also routes that they're using, whether or not they're foresting on them. So it's trying to keep up with where they're going to be, because regardless of if they're there, we need to put a heavy metal program in before winter, before they start to run heavy on.
So in other words, no.
No, we have prioritised the list with them.
No, so basically they're all harvesting this winter. Okay, yep. Okay, that's fine. Okay, that's all.
Oh, some of those roads will pack up, Mr.
Just
Chairman.
checking. Okay, Councillor Seymour.
Thanks. I can't see Waimuka Road on that list.
So Waimuka Road has been out and been assessed. It's not one for heavy metalling this season. I know that it is going to get a grade, so it's in the maintenance program. So we're doing
It's
our...
no, it's a safety issue because it's a rural school bus.
So it's been assessed as having enough metal to be able to be gradable. It doesn't need more metal added to it, is what we've had.
I'll bring you some photographs after it's been done.
Look forward to it.
Just a couple of points. Mangatukarau Road is not a rural bus route. There's actually no one lives up there now, so I think we can. And Ohungia Road is, and Ohungia Road has a school bus every day, and that is quite significant. So could we bring that up? And Wharekirī, only a very short section of Wharekirī has a school bus route, and I don't think there's any forest harvest going on Wharekirī, so we just might look at that. It's right near to me, so I pretty much know what's going on.
As a point, the Rakaroa Road, also one of their biggest ones at the moment is quarry. There's that's all used. That's all forestry metal going out of there. So, okay.
And Waimata Valley Road sure does have a forest harvest going on. Right. So we just need to tidy up.
Any other points you'd like to raise? Right.
I'll move to receive the report.
Yeah.
Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Burdett. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. So before we move into the minutes, there's a bit of GB.
Yeah,
Councillor Seymour.
I just want to raise, because I've done it for an RFS and I've been told that RFSs are not the right place to send requests around the state highway, and there's a couple of other photographs there. It's just drawn to our attention by a local resident, and it's very significant erosion at Tirihau Point, and the photos there show how close it is to the road. It's still 1 car width from the road, but I would suggest that our roading team should be looking at whatever resource consents are going to be required and what is going to. It's near to where hard engineering has been done to protect the road in over the last 10 or 15 years. So there's one section in one place, and then there became another section in another spot, and near there is where we've had to rail off an area which is in a driveway where people go to Freedom Camp. So it's just indicative of around Tirihau Point there is quite significant erosion affecting the state highway, and I wondered what was being done about it in a pre-planning sense. Thank you.
So Helen, I'm looking at you.
Through the chair, that's correct. The RFS has obviously not been dealt with because it's a state highway matter. So I talked to Councillor Seymour before that. I will follow it up, and I'll also be able to provide her a reply directly through the appropriate NZTA process.
I should say, because I sent photos to the mayor out of interest, he sent it straight off to NZTA, who told him almost by return email to send it back to T Road. So he sent it off to the lady from NZTA who comes to our meetings, and it came back real quick. So thank you. I look forward to something because I know the planning takes quite a long time, and so that's what's really important. And I appreciate there's some other photographs which I think are really relevant, and I understand some rocks are going in there more or less as we speak in that erosion on Waimar Road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I've made Marcus come and sit next to me just to make the committee aware this is his last meeting that is going to be here at council, and Marcus has been here for 13 years, which is quite a substantial time. So Marcus is moving on, but just thought I'd like to thank him publicly for the service that he's had over those 13 years. It's been a range of projects since starting in stormwater and running water for us, which is 24/7 operation, and there's a lot of late nights, early mornings, phone calls to go out and have a look at things. The most prominent one was the main trunk break, which Marcus managed superbly through that period. I'm sure all of you remember that. So thank you to Marcus. We've really appreciated it.
And the oversight of our water, the town's water supply.
You can always come back.
On behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you for all the times you've attended here and helped us solve the problems. Oh, no, we helped you solve them. I'm not quite sure. But anyhow, and wish you all the best in whatever you do in the future.
Awesome. Yeah. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Marcus. Thank you.
Is it, there was other issues to raise? Right. I'll move, we're going to public excluded for the minutes